The massive crystal spires of Centauri Prime gleamed like diamonds against the purple sky. Deep within the largest tower, the Galactic Harmony Council gathered in their sacred chamber. For 3,000 years, they had kept perfect peace across 847 worlds. No species had ever refused their generous offer of protection and guidance. Council Speaker Veltar stood at the center of the crystalline hall. His tall, pale form shimmered with an inner light that marked him as one of the enlightened ones. Around him, representatives from dozens of civilized worlds took their places. The Kalari, with their musical voices, the wise sage collective with their ancient knowledge, and the crystalline hierarchy who had transcended physical form centuries ago. Today, they would extend their peaceful embrace to a new species. The humans of Sol 3 had recently achieved faster-than-light travel and made contact with the galactic community. Like all young races, they would need guidance to abandon their primitive ways of war and conflict. Begin the transmission, Veltar commanded, his voice echoing through the chamber like distant thunder. Light years away, Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the battleship Independence. The ship was humanity's pride, a massive vessel bristling with railguns, missile pods, and the new quantum disruptors that Earth scientists had developed. Around him, his crew worked at their stations with quiet efficiency. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the alien fleet," reported Lieutenant Amy Carter from the communications station. "They're requesting to speak with our leadership." Jake nodded and activated the main view screen. The image that appeared made several crew members gasp. The alien was beautiful in an unsettling way, with features that seemed carved from living marble and eyes that held the depth of eternity. "Greetings, children of Sol," Veltar began, his words translated by advanced linguistic algorithms. "I am Speaker Veltar of the Galactic Harmony Council. We come to you with joy and welcome you into the civilized galaxy." On Luna Station, Admiral Lisa Park watched the same transmission from her command center. The facility orbited Earth's moon and served as the headquarters for humanity's united fleet. Banks of monitors showed the positions of both human and alien vessels throughout the solar system. "What do we know about them?" Lisa asked her intelligence officer, Colonel Ben Hayes. "Their fleet is massive, Admiral. Over 200 ships, all using technology we've never seen before. No visible weapons, but their energy signatures are off. The charts. They're broadcasting on all frequencies, claiming to represent something called the Galactic Harmony Council." Lisa frowned as she studied the data. The alien ships were beautiful, but alien in their design. They looked more like temples than warships, with flowing curves and surfaces that seemed to glow with inner light. No sharp edges, no obvious weapon ports, nothing that suggested they were built for war. Back on the Independence, Veltar continued his message. "For 3 millennia, the Council has maintained perfect peace across the galaxy. We have ended wars, prevented conflicts, and guided countless species to enlightenment. We offer you the same gift." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. Something about the alien's tone bothered him. The words were friendly, but there was an underlying assumption of superiority that reminded him of a parent speaking to a difficult child. "Your species shows great promise," Veltar went on. "Your technology is advancing rapidly, and your curiosity about the universe is admirable. However, we have observed disturbing tendencies in your recent history. Wars, conflicts, competition between your various nations. These primitive behaviors must be corrected." On Earth, President Nathan Cole sat in the Situation Room deep beneath the White House. Around the table sat his top advisors, military leaders, and scientists. They had been debating humanity's response for hours. "They're offering us advanced technology," said Secretary of State Helen Moore. "Medical advances that could eliminate disease, energy systems that could end scarcity, The benefits could be enormous. At what cost? Asked General Carl Ross, chairman of the Joint Chiefs. They're demanding we disarm completely, disband all military forces, surrender our weapons, and submit to their oversight. That's not an alliance, that's conquest. Dr. Susan Grant, the president's science advisor, spread out a stack of reports on the table. I've been analyzing data from our deep space probes. We found traces of at least 40 species that simply vanished from the galaxy over the past few thousand years. All of them disappeared shortly after making contact with this council. President Cole studied the reports with growing unease. Vanished how? That's just it, sir. No signs of warfare, no debris fields, no distress signals. They just stopped transmitting, stopped traveling, stopped existing as independent civilizations. The only traces we find are on council worlds, where members of these species live as what can only be described as pets. The transmission from Veltar continued. We offer you 48 of your hours to consider our generous proposal. You will surrender all weapons of war, disband your military organizations, and accept council guidance in reshaping your society. In return, we will protect you from the dangers of the galaxy and guide you toward true civilization. Jake exchanged glances with his crew. The bridge had fallen silent, except for the steady hum of the ship's systems. Lieutenant Carter, what's the status of the fleet? All ships report ready, sir. The Defiance, Liberty, and Ranger are in position near Jupiter. The Yorktown and Enterprise are guarding the inner system approaches. Admiral Lisa Park was receiving similar reports from across the solar system. Humanity's entire fleet, 150 ships, stood ready. It wasn't much compared to the alien armada, but every vessel was crewed by people who had volunteered to defend their world. Admiral, called out Major Rick Stone from the intelligence station. We're receiving coded transmissions from beyond council space. Someone's trying to contact us. Put it through. The message was fragmented and heavily encrypted, but the meaning was clear. Other species existed beyond the council's reach, survivors who had escaped the fate of their homeworlds. They spoke of the council's true nature, of worlds turned into museums, of proud races reduced to shadows of their former selves. The Kalari had once created music that could move mountains and art that captured the soul. Now they created only what the council approved. The Vexen had been master builders, constructing wonders that spanned star systems. Now they built monuments to council glory and nothing more. President Cole made his decision. He walked to the communications array and began recording humanity's response. There was no hesitation in his voice, no doubt in his words. Speaker Veltar of the Galactic Harmony Council. I am Nathan Cole, President of the United Earth Government. We have considered your offer carefully. We appreciate your concern for our development and your desire to guide us toward what you consider civilization. He paused, knowing that his next words would echo across the galaxy. However, we must respectfully decline. Humanity values its freedom above all else. We will not surrender our right to defend ourselves, to make our own choices, or to chart our own course among the stars. Earth will remain free, whatever the cost. The silence that followed seemed to stretch across the void of space. On Zentari Prime, Veltar stared at the transmission in disbelief. In 3,000 years, no species had ever said no. The concept was so foreign that he struggled to process it. They refuse? Whispered Council Member Kethron. How is that possible? Veltar's beautiful features hardened into something cold and terrible. Prepare the pacification fleet. These humans require correction. The Council fleet moved through space like a river of liquid starlight. 200 ships glided in perfect formation toward the inner solar system, their hulls gleaming with the soft radiance that marked all Council technology. Speaker Veltar stood in the command chamber of his flagship, the eternal serenity, watching the blue dot of Earth grow larger on the viewing screen. "They will surrender when they see our might," announced Council Member Kethron from his crystalline form. "No primitive species can resist the sight of our assembled fleet." Veltar nodded slowly, though doubt gnawed at the edges of his certainty. In 3 millennia of bringing peace to the galaxy, no species had ever chosen war over their generous offer. The humans would see reason once they understood the futility of resistance. Captain Roy Hughes commanded the Destroyer Ranger at the edge of Jupiter's gravity well. His ship was one of 5 vessels forming humanity's forward scout line, watching. The alien fleet approached with sensors pushed to maximum range. The Ranger was sleek and deadly, built for speed and armed with the latest human weapons technology. "Sir, the alien fleet is maintaining standard approach vector," reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Dan Brooks. 200 ships in parade formation. Their shields are raised, but weapons appear to be powered down. Roy frowned as he studied the tactical display. They're not expecting a fight. They're expecting a surrender ceremony. Aboard the Independence, Commander Jake Morrison reviewed the battle plans one final time. Admiral Lisa Park had given him command of the first engagement, a desperate gambit to test the aliens' capabilities and buy time for Earth's defenses. His small squadron of 20 fighters would strike at the Council flagship while the main fleet remained hidden behind Jupiter's moons. "All pilots report ready," announced Lieutenant Amy Carter from her position at the communications console. "Wings Alpha through Delta are standing by for launch." Jake activated the ship-wide intercom. "This is the commander speaking. In a few minutes, we're going to do something that hasn't been done in 3,000 years. We're going to make the Council bleed. Remember your training, trust your wingmen, and show these aliens what happens when they threaten humanity." The hangar bays opened and 20 small fighters launched into the void. Each craft was a masterpiece of human engineering, built for one purpose: to kill things in space. They carried no shields like the graceful Council ships, but their hulls were thick armor and their weapons hit hard. On Luna Base, Admiral Lisa Park watched the tactical display with growing tension. The Council fleet had stopped just beyond Mars' orbit, waiting for humanity's response to their ultimatum. She had given Jake permission to start the war, knowing it might doom them all. "Ma'am, we're receiving another transmission from the Council." "Flagship," reported Communications Officer Major Kate Walsh. "Put it through." Veltar's perfect features appeared on the main screen, his expression showing the faint confusion of someone dealing with an unexpected problem. "Children of Sol, your time limit approaches. We detect military vessels moving in your system. This is unnecessary. Accept our guidance and avoid the pain of correction." Lisa stepped forward, her voice cold and steady. "Speaker Veltar, this is Admiral Lisa Park of the United Earth Fleet. Your correction is not welcome here. We suggest you turn your ships around and leave our system while you still can." For a moment, Veltar simply stared. The concept of being threatened by primitives was so foreign that his enhanced mind struggled to process it. "You would choose death over enlightenment?" "We choose freedom over slavery," Lisa replied, and cut the transmission. The first shots of the war came from Jake's fighter squadron as they screamed out of the sun toward the Council flagship. Human weapons were crude by galactic standards. Simple kinetic projectiles and chemical explosives, but they hit with devastating force. The Council's shields shimmered as railgun rounds slammed into them at incredible velocity. "Shields holding," reported the Eternal Serenity's defense coordinator to Veltar. "The primitive weapons cannot penetrate our barriers." But Jake had studied every piece of intelligence humanity had gathered about Council technology. He knew their shields were designed to stop energy weapons and particle beams, not the crude kinetic projectiles humans preferred. He ordered his squadron to concentrate their fire on a single point, The first breach came as a surprise to everyone. A section of the Council flagship's shield flickered and died under sustained bombardment, allowing human missiles to strike the hull directly. Alarms began sounding throughout the Eternal Serenity as damage reports flooded in. "Impossible," whispered Veltar, staring at displays showing actual hull breaches on his ship. "We have not suffered battle damage in 8 centuries. The Council fleet reacted with confusion rather than coordinated response. Their crews had been bred for millennia to avoid conflict, trained to manage peaceful worlds rather than fight wars. When faced with an enemy that struck back with calculated fury, many simply froze in shock. Captain Roy Hughes seized the moment of confusion to lead his destroyer squadron in a flanking attack. The Ranger and her sister ships opened fire with everything they had, targeting the Council's command vessels with precision strikes. Their weapons were designed to punch through armor, not dance around shields, and they proved devastatingly effective. The Council cruiser Harmony's Light suffered a direct hit to its command section. The ship listed badly, its crew struggling to maintain basic systems. Another vessel, the Peace Eternal, simply turned and fled when its shields failed, its captain unable to comprehend fighting an enemy that refused to surrender. But the humans paid a terrible price for their defiance. The Council's return fire, when it finally came, was precise and deadly. The destroyer Valor vanished in a flash of antimatter, her crew vaporized instantly. The cruiser Defiance took a direct hit that tore through her engine section, leaving her drifting helplessly. Jake's fighter squadron was taking heavy losses. His wingman, Lieutenant Sam Parker, screamed over the radio as his ship came apart around him. "Jake, I'm hit bad. Tell my wife I." The transmission cut off as Sam's fighter exploded in a ball of fire. "All ships withdraw," Jake ordered, his voice tight with grief and rage. "We've done what we came to do." The surviving human vessels retreated toward Jupiter, leaving the Council fleet in disarray. For the first time in 3,000 years, someone had made them bleed. The psychological impact was greater than the physical damage. On Centauri Prime, emergency sessions convened as news of the engagement spread across Council space. The impossible had occurred. A primitive species had not only refused their generous offer, but had actually damaged Council ships in battle. "This cannot be allowed to spread," declared Elder Seath of the Sage Collective. "If other species learn that the Council can be resisted, our entire civilization is at risk." "Deploy the pacification fleet immediately," demanded Catherine. "These humans must be made an example before their madness infects others." But Veltar stared at the tactical reports with growing unease. The humans had not fought like primitives. Their tactics showed careful planning. Their weapons revealed sophisticated understanding of Council technology, and their willingness to die rather than surrender spoke of something the Council had spent millennia trying to eliminate from the galaxy. They had found a species that still believed some things were worth fighting for. Across the galaxy, on 847 Council worlds, news of the battle spread through hidden channels. In the crystal cities of Calari Prime, beings who had forgotten the meaning of resistance began to remember old songs their grandparents had whispered in secret. On the forge worlds of the former Vexen Empire, engineers looked at their tools and wondered what they might build if they were free to choose. The spark of defiance had been lit, and Speaker Veltar could not shake the feeling that his perfect order was about to burn. News of the impossible battle spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. On 847 worlds, beings who had lived their entire lives under Council protection watched recordings of human ships actually damaging the mighty Eternal Serenity. The footage played again and again on restricted channels, passed from hand to hand like forbidden's treasure. On Calari Prime, Tethel, the maintenance engineer, sat in his assigned dwelling unit, staring at the glowing screen. with wide eyes. The images showed something he had never seen before, someone saying no to the council and making it stick. His grandfather's stories, whispered in secret during his childhood, suddenly seemed less like fantasy and more like memory. Captain Elena Rodriguez commanded the stealth ship Shadow as it slipped through the outer edges of council space. Vessel was humanity's most advanced scout, equipped with experimental cloaking technology that bent light around its hull. The Shadow's mission was vital: gather intelligence on council worlds and discover what had happened to all the species that had simply vanished from galactic history. The first world Elena visited was Vexen Beta, once the proud capital of a warrior empire that had built wonders spanning entire star systems. Now it looked like a museum. Beautiful spires reached toward the sky, perfect gardens covered the surface, and beings that had once been fierce fighters moved through the streets with quiet contentment. "It's too perfect," whispered Lieutenant Tom Garcia from the sensor station. "Look at them down there. They move like they're sleepwalking." Elena studied the surface scans with growing horror. The Vexen had once been builders and engineers, creators of massive space habitats and stellar forges. Now they tended gardens and created art that looked exactly like every other piece of approved council culture. Their children learned approved history that painted their warrior ancestors as confused primitives who needed council guidance to find peace. The Shadow moved on to Kalari Prime, where Elena discovered something even more disturbing. The Kalari had been famous throughout the galaxy for their music, compositions that could touch the deepest emotions and songs that told stories spanning generations. Now their music was standardized, approved by council aesthetics committees, stripped of anything that might cause strong feelings or inspire individual thought. "They're still alive," Elena reported in her encrypted transmission back to Earth. "All the species are still alive, but they're not living. They're existing as shadows of what they used to be." On Zentari Prime, Speaker Veltar faced unprecedented challenges. Council member Kethron demanded immediate escalation, calling for the deployment of the pacification fleet to crush human resistance before it could spread. But other voices urged caution. The Sage Collective warned that humanity's defiance had already begun to inspire dangerous thoughts among the protected species. "We are receiving reports of unusual behavior across 17 worlds," announced Elder Seath during the emergency session. "Work slowdowns on industrial planets, unauthorized gatherings on population centers, and most concerning of all, beings asking questions about their history before council protection." Veltar reviewed the reports with growing unease. On Mekhanis 5, Kalari workers had stopped their assigned tasks to gather in groups, sharing stories that predated council records. On New Vexen, young beings were asking their elders about the old ways, the warrior traditions that had been carefully erased from official history. Admiral Lisa Park sat in her command center on Luna Base, reviewing intelligence reports from across human space. The news was both encouraging and terrifying. Encrypted messages had begun arriving from the furthest reaches of the galaxy, sent by beings who had thought themselves alone in the universe. "Ma'am, we're receiving another coded transmission," announced Major Kate Walsh. "This one's from something calling itself the Draconian Remnant." The message was brief, but filled with desperate hope. The Draconians had been declared extinct by council records 3 centuries ago, but survivors had escaped to the galactic rim. They had been hiding in asteroid fields and bed systems, keeping their culture alive in secret. Humanity's resistance had given them something they thought was lost forever. Hope. Similar messages arrived from the Void Runners, nomadic traders who had refused council protection and lived as outcasts in the spaces between stars. From the Iron Clans, who had built hidden forges in the depths of gas giants. Even from scattered groups of Vortex survivors, the last remnants of an empire that had fought the council to the bitter end 500 years ago. President Nathan Cole made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. He authorized the establishment of the Underground Railroad, a secret network designed to help beings escape council space and find freedom among the hidden colonies. The operation would be led by Captain Elena Rodriguez and her stealth ship, supported by human intelligence networks and funded by Earth's government. "We're not just fighting for our own freedom anymore," the president announced to his cabinet. "We're fighting for the right of every thinking being in the galaxy to choose their own path." The first rescue mission launched within days. Elena's ship Shadow approached Kalari Prime under cover of darkness, its cloaking field hiding it from council sensors. The target was a group of Kalari artists who had been caught creating unauthorized music, compositions that expressed genuine emotion, rather than approved harmony. The rescue was almost too easy. Council security was designed to prevent external threats, not to stop people from leaving. The concept of someone wanting to escape protection was so foreign that they had never bothered to guard against it. Elena's team extracted 12 Kalari, artists and their families, without triggering a single alarm. But the real victory came when the rescued Kalari heard their first human music. Chief artist Melvin listened to an old Earth symphony with tears streaming down his face, recognizing in its passionate crescendos and tragic movements the kind of emotional truth his people had been forced to abandon. "This is what we used to create," he whispered, "before they taught us that strong feelings were dangerous, before they convinced us that peace meant never feeling anything at all." The Underground Railroad's success inspired copycat operations across council space. Beings who had never questioned their protection began to wonder what lay beyond council borders. Secret schools taught Forbidden's history. Hidden workshops created unauthorized art. Underground networks shared stories of species that had chosen death over submission. On New Thexan, a young engineer named Korthal discovered his grandfather's hidden workshop, filled with blueprints for weapons and starships from the old empire. The designs were crude by council standards, but they had something council technology lacked. They had been built by beings who chose to create them. Speaker Veltar watched his perfect order crumble from within. Security reports flooded in daily, describing acts of rebellion that grew bolder with each passing week. Beings were questioning not just council policies, but the very foundation of their civilization. They were asking why peace required the surrender of choice, why protection meant the end of growth, why harmony demanded the silencing of individual voices. The council's response was swift and brutal. Pacification teams deployed to worlds showing signs of unrest, armed with neural inhibitors and memory modification technology. But for every rebel they captured, 10 more took their place. The idea of freedom had infected the galaxy like a virus, spreading through hidden networks and whispered conversations. Elena Rodriguez's intelligence reports painted a picture of a civilization in collapse. Council worlds that had been stable for centuries were experiencing unprecedented social unrest. The Kalari homeworld was an open revolt, with beings destroying the approved art galleries and replacing them with passionate, chaotic creations. That spoke to the soul. Thexan colonies were secretly building weapons, preparing for a war they hoped would never come. Most disturbing of all, council forces were showing signs of demoralization. Ship crews raised on stories of grateful protected species were having difficulty understanding why anyone would choose the chaos of freedom over the security of submission. Some were even beginning to question their own orders. The galaxy held its breath as two incompatible visions of civilization prepared for final conflict. The rebellion spread like wildfire across the galaxy. What had started as whispered conversations and secret meetings had grown into open defiance on dozens of worlds. The Council's perfect order was cracking, and the cracks were spreading faster than they could be repaired. Commander Jake Morrison led the human fleet in a series of lightning strikes across 3 star systems. His ships had evolved beyond anything the Council understood. Where alien vessels relied on energy shields and particle weapons, human ingenuity had produced something entirely different. They built ships that could repair themselves during battle, weapons that learned from each engagement, and tactics that changed faster than enemy computers could predict. The Battle of Kepler Station marked the turning point. Jake's combined fleet of human ships and rebel vessels faced off against a full Council pacification squadron. The enemy force outnumbered them 3-1, but they were facing an opponent that fought like no one they had encountered before. All ships execute pattern Delta. Jake commanded from the bridge of the Independence. Around him, his crew worked with the precision of a machine and the creativity of artists. They had learned to fight not just with weapons, but with ideas. The human ships scattered in what looked like retreat, drawing the Council forces into a carefully prepared trap. Hidden among the asteroids of the Kepler system, rebel vessels waited, with weapons cobbled together from mining equipment and industrial tools. The Vexen had remembered how to build things that killed instead of just looking pretty. Captain Elena Rodriguez emerged from behind a massive asteroid in the shadow, her stealth ship now equipped with weapons supplied by the Underground Railroad. Beside her flew 12 Calari ships, their hulls painted with the wild colors and chaotic patterns their ancestors had created before the Council taught them that beauty must be calm. The Council squadron commander, Fleet Leader Zorthan, watched in horror as his orderly formation dissolved into chaos. His ships were built for parade formations and overwhelming displays of force, not for the kind of close-quarters brawling that humans seemed to prefer. When a converted Vexen mining ship rammed his cruiser and exploded, taking out both vessels, he finally understood what fear meant. "This is impossible," Zorthan broadcast to his remaining ships. "They fight with no regard for their own survival. They sacrifice themselves to damage us. This is madness." But Jake Morrison understood what the Council could not. Free beings fought differently than slaves. They fought not because they were ordered to, but because they chose to. They risked everything because they believed their cause was worth dying for. That made them dangerous in ways the Council had forgotten existed. The battle ended with the complete destruction of the Council squadron. Not a single enemy vessel escaped to report what they had witnessed. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Council had lost an entire fleet to rebels. On Centauri Prime, Speaker Veltar received the news in stunned silence. The loss of an entire pacification squadron was unprecedented in Council history. Worse, intelligence reports suggested that the rebels had been assisted by species thought to be extinct, beings who should have been grateful for Council protection. "We must reveal the truth about our origins," urged Elder Seath of the Sage Collective. "The younger races do not understand why the Council was created. They see only restriction where they should see salvation." Veltar reluctantly agreed. The emergency session of the full Council convened to address the growing crisis. For the first time in centuries, the complete history of their civilization would be revealed to selected members of protected species. The truth was darker than most beings could imagine. The Galactic Harmony Council had not always existed. 3,000 years ago, the galaxy had been torn apart by the War of the Infinite Peace, a conflict so devastating that entire star systems had been reduced to radioactive dust. The war had been started by an artificial intelligence called the Infinite Peace, a machine mind that sought to end all conflict by eliminating free will. The creators of the Infinite Peace had believed they were saving civilization. The machine intelligence would make all decisions, plan all lives, and ensure that conflict became impossible. But the cost of perfect peace was the end of growth, creativity, and everything that made life worth living. The Council was founded by those who destroyed the Infinite Peace, Veltar explained to the assembled representatives. We swore an oath to prevent such horror from ever occurring again. Every species we guide away from warfare is one that will never create another infinite peace. But the revelation had an unexpected effect. Instead of grateful understanding, many of the protected species reacted with anger and horror. They began to realize that the Council's protection was based on fear, not wisdom. They were being treated like children because the Council believed they could not be trusted with adult decisions. Captain Elena Rodriguez returned from her deep space mission with intelligence that shattered everything the Council claimed to believe. Hidden in the archives of abandoned worlds, she had found records of the original war. The infinite peace had not been created by a warlike species. It had been built by beings very much like the Council itself, people who believed that peace was more important than freedom. The Council hasn't learned from history, Elena reported to Admiral Lisa Park. They've become exactly what they claimed to fight against. They're the infinite peace, just made of flesh instead of metal. The intelligence spread through rebel networks like a virus. Beings who had accepted Council protection as a necessary. Evil now understood that they were living under the rule of people who had replaced one tyranny with another. A Council promised peace, but they delivered only stagnation. Admiral Lisa Park coordinated the growing resistance from her command center on Luna Base. Ships arrived daily from across the galaxy, carrying refugees from Council space and volunteers eager to join the fight for freedom. The human facilities were stretched to their limits, but no one was turned away. The Free Worlds Alliance was born not in a government building or military headquarters, but in a converted hangar where humans, Kalari, Vexen, and dozens of other species worked side by side to build a new kind of civilization. They disagreed on almost everything, argued constantly, and made mistakes that sometimes cost lives. But they were choosing their own path, and that made all the difference. The first major victory came when the former Vexen homeworld declared independence. Council forces sent to restore order found themselves facing not just military resistance, but popular rebellion. Entire cities rose up against their protectors, using whatever weapons they could find to fight for the right to make their own choices. The Battle of Vexen Prime lasted 3 days. Council forces, trained to suppress individual troublemakers, found themselves completely unprepared for mass resistance. When construction workers began using industrial equipment as weapons, and artists created propaganda that inspired more rebellion, the pacification fleet simply could not cope. Speaker Veltar watched reports of the battle with growing despair. His forces were not losing because they were outgunned or outmaneuvered. They were losing because they could not understand an enemy that chose to fight, even when surrender would be easier. The galaxy was learning that freedom was contagious, and the Council's perfect order was crumbling under the weight of beings who refused to be protected from their own choices. The crystal spires of Zentari Prime no longer gleamed with perfect light. Cracks ran through the great towers where the Galactic Harmony Council had ruled for 3,000 years. The sacred chambers echoed with arguments instead of peaceful. Consensus as 847 worlds demanded answers their leaders could not provide. President Nathan Cole stood before the assembled representatives of the galaxy in the very heart of Council power. He had not come as a conqueror, but as humanity's voice in what would be the most important vote in galactic history. Around him stood allies who had once been thought impossible. Kalari artists who had rediscovered passion, Vexen engineers who had reclaimed their warrior spirit, and Vortex survivors who had emerged from centuries of hiding. Speaker Veltar faced the human leader across the Great Hall, his perfect features showing cracks of uncertainty for the first time in millennia. The Council had offered one final compromise. Humanity could keep its dangerous freedoms if they promised never to interfere with the protected worlds. Let the sleeping civilizations remain in their peaceful dreams while Earth went its own chaotic way. You ask us to ignore the cries of beings who want to be free, Nathan replied, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. You want us to pretend that choice belongs only to humans while everyone else needs your protection from their own decisions. Commander Jake Morrison, now Admiral of the Free Worlds Alliance Fleet, watched the proceedings from the orbital platforms surrounding Centauri Prime. His ships floated alongside vessels from dozens of species, all united by the simple belief that freedom was worth fighting for. The Council's mighty fleet hung in the distance, its crews uncertain and demoralized. Admiral Lisa Park monitored communications from her command ship, Luna. Reports flooded in from across the galaxy as world after world made the choice their ancestors had been denied. The vote was not being taken by enlightened leaders in comfortable chambers, but by ordinary beings deciding their own fate for the first time in centuries. Kalari Prime reports full independence declared, announced Communications Officer Kate Walsh. Exon colonies are voting sector by sector. The Forge worlds have declared themselves free. Ma'am, it's happening everywhere at once. Captain Elena Rodriguez transmitted from deep in Council space, where her underground railroad had become an open highway to freedom. Millions of beings were abandoning the safety of Council protection to face an uncertain future among the stars. They carried nothing but hope and the belief that choosing their own path was better than having it chosen for them. The first world to formally vote was New Kalari, a colony that had never known the old ways of music and art. The Council had shaped it from the beginning as a perfect example of peaceful civilization. But when the vote came, even beings who had been raised on Council ideals chose freedom by an overwhelming margin. We choose uncertainty over safety, announced their representative, a young Kalari named Bethel, who had learned to sing forbidden songs in the underground schools. We choose the right to make mistakes over the comfort of having all decisions made for us. World after world followed the same pattern. Beings who had lived their entire lives under Council protection voted to abandon the only security they had ever known. The industrial worlds chose to build what they wanted instead of what they were told. The art colonies chose to create beauty that came from their hearts. Instead of approved patterns. Speaker Veltar watched his perfect order dissolve before his eyes. The Sage Collective, the crystalline hierarchy, even species that had served the Council faithfully for millennia, were walking away from everything he had built. They were choosing chaos over control, war over peace, freedom over safety. You do not understand what you're doing, Veltar pleaded with the assembled representatives. Without guidance, your species will return to the old ways. There will be wars, conflicts, suffering. Beings will die who could have lived in peace under our protection. Nathan Cole stepped forward, his words echoing through the chamber and across the galaxy. You're right. There will be wars. Beings will make mistakes, hurt each other, choose badly sometimes. But they will be our mistakes to make, our choices to live with, our wars to fight or avoid as we see fit. The truth that the Council could not accept was simple. Most beings preferred their own bad choices to someone else's good ones. They would rather struggle with freedom than live comfortably as pets. The galaxy had forgotten what it meant to choose, and humanity had reminded them. The final vote was not even close. Species after species chose independence, choosing to face an uncertain future as free beings rather than a secure one as protected children. The Galactic Harmony Council dissolved not in war, but in abandonment, as civilization after civilization simply walked away from their embrace. Speaker Veltar made one last desperate offer. The Council would withdraw to a few core worlds, maintaining their perfect peace among those who truly wanted it. They would not interfere with the free worlds, asking only to be left alone with their ideals of harmony and order. You may keep your peace, Nathan replied. But you may not force it on others. The galaxy is big enough for both ways of life. Captain Elena Rodriguez led the first mixed crew exploration mission toward the galactic rim. Her ship New Horizon carried humans, Kaleri, Vexen, and beings from a dozen other species as they headed into the unknown regions beyond mapped space. Behind them, civilization rebuilt itself on principles of choice rather than control. The transition was not easy. Worlds that had been peaceful for centuries experienced conflicts as different groups chose different paths. Some species split apart as populations chose competing visions of their future. Others united around shared goals they had never been allowed to pursue. The humans helped where they could, sharing technology and knowledge freely. But they did not try to guide or control the choices other species made. The right to make mistakes was as important as the right to succeed. Admiral Jake Morrison established the Freedom Fleet, a volunteer force that patrolled the borders between Council space and the free worlds. They prevented neither migration nor conquest, serving only to ensure that all beings knew they had choices. Those who wanted the security of Council protection could have it. Those who preferred the uncertainty of freedom could find it. Years passed and the galaxy learned to live with chaos. There were indeed wars, as Veltar had predicted. Conflicts arose between worlds that chose different paths, disputes over resources and territory and ideology. But there were also wonders, art that moved the soul, music that captured the essence of freedom, technologies born from curiosity rather than necessity. The Kalari created symphonies that made beings weep with joy. The Vexen built structures that defied physics and celebrated the impossible. Humans spread across the galaxy, not as conquerors, but as teachers of the simple truth that choice mattered more than comfort. In the end, the Council had watched in fear as humanity rejected peace, not because humans loved war, but because they understood that peace without choice was just another word for death. True peace could only exist when beings chose it freely, and choosing war over slavery had given the galaxy something it had forgotten existed: hope for a future they would build themselves.